Evans is a former NYPD detective and says do not...
Everybody's looking for the monkey.
Yeah. So you
our smiles, I'll give you a little bit of a brief.
Hello.
And welcome everybody. It's Friday night, and you know what Friday night means. Friday night means another Friday night with your pet detective. I am Ardina Seward. That guy over there. On one of these shows, I'll get my screen direction right. That guy right. Is Angel Nieves. He is the head of the show. Angel Nieves is a former NYPD detective who has now dedicated his life, his career, his new career, to helping people to find lost pets. And he's also an animal activist. And tonight we have the pleasure of having a veteran on who was actually the first person on our first show. And we're delighted to have her back again. We have Catherine Love. Catherine, welcome back.
Before we do, I want to talk about a lost dog that's been hit on the news. And the owner of the dog, this happened on November 2nd, around 2 o'clock in the Bronx. The person stepped out of the vehicle, left it running to go to his store. When he came back out, the car was gone, and his dog Brownie was gone. It was a Chihuahua miniature pinch. And what happened was he tracked the car. It was going through the Washington Bridge to Jersey. A couple of days later, the person was found sleeping in his car in Newark, New Jersey, and he was arrested. This guy, his name is Cesar Pena and Pagan. And what happened was that he, for a couple of days, was on Facebook driving the stolen car. And he was high, he was stoned. And at one time, he even actually passed out.
While he was driving?
Well, he stopped, thank God. But he was nodding out. He stopped and he just went to sleep. And the video kept on running on Facebook. He had the whole thing there, which came out in the news. So he's arrested, but the dog is still missing. And we have to, I want you to listen to the owner of the dog pleading to please bring his dog back. Listen. And I guess he's not talking. Okay.
Let's see.
That was quick.
Put it on the screen again, Angel. Let me see if I can activate the video. I don't know if I can, but it's not. Hold on. No, it's not.
It's moving, but it's not moving.
We're not hearing that. We have his picture up, but we're not hearing. Well, I think.
Well, he's the owner of the dog, and he's playing. He says, "Please listen. I want you to bring my dog back. I know what I did. It was wrong, but I know somebody has my dog. I know you don't know the dog is stolen. You're taking care of my dog, but please bring it back to me." That's the story of most of the stuff, and the case is still acting. But this is the dog right here, and the dog's name is Brownie, and this is the missing dog. It's a male 8-year-old min pin, which miniature pincher, mixed with a Chihuahua. He is microchipped, but he's not neutered. And he needs his medication for a heart condition. So please, if you have this dog, if you know anything about this dog or knows who has the dog, please contact this number. You see, it's a $2,500 reward. He raised it to $3,500 reward. He wants his dog. And I'm sorry about that video, but Anyway,
That's
it
okay.
happened.
This is a live broadcast, so stuff happens, but the thing is that we carry on anyway, and the audience got the message. There's a picture of the dog. You have an owner out there who is without his pet tonight because some guy decided that he was going to take the dog. We don't know what reasons he took the dog for. Was the dog sold? If the dog is sold, then whoever has that dog, you should contact the owner because there is a reward. That dog has more value to the owner, the original owner, than that dog will ever have to you. So please reunite the dog with the dog's owner. So
Now is our special guest,
now our special guest is
Dr. Love.
Dr. Catherine Love. So, Catherine, if I may call you Catherine, what have you been up to in the animal world?
A level 1 trauma center down here in Arkansas. We are a state that is underrepresented for veterinarians. We have 30 counties that do not even have veterinarian care options. We only have 350 licensed veterinarians, and only about 3/4 of them are actually working. Even less are providing services for small animals, so what you consider pets. So we are working with several universities here in our area to set up an emergency facility that'll be 24 hours, because right now the entire state does not have after hours emergency options. We have 4 facilities across the state available, and this is a big state. And they all close between 11 and 12. So we're setting up 24-hour level 1 trauma options for our citizens. That's what my focus is of late.
What's the, obviously you have a wide panorama of pets here. What pets are there the most? Is it cats? Is it dogs? Are they birds? What's the dominant pet species?
So, I mean, we are a rural community, so we have quite a few farm animals. If we're counting pets and not actual animal counts, dogs are just like the national average, are going to be predominant. Cats running a close second. Exotics, which make me cringe a little. Most of the emergencies I see with exotics are poor husbandry, people that are not well educated, and the animals suffer. So it's hard for me to get on board with people owning exotic species. But we also have a lot of farm animals. So goats, chickens are a big runner-up for that third space spot. And then horses. We have a few cattle farms, but we're mostly chickens when it comes to farming, and goats, and then there's recreational, equestrian, and horse racing.
What comes to mind is that if people aren't that educated about how to disease-proof their pets, disease happens. There's bird flu, there's bovine cow disease, there are all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of diseases that can run rampant in the animal community if the animals aren't properly vaccinated and if they aren't properly segregated and cared for. So have you seen evidence of that?
So not so much, because our what we call, I know it's a kind of a buzzword, but our biosafety is pretty strong here. So Tyson Industries is here, so we do have big food production. So our biosecurity is pretty tight. What I'm more referring to versus communicable infectious diseases is just lack of knowledge on how to care and house exotic species. So like bearded dragons, these kind of exotic pets you can go to Petco and buy, and they're considered disposable, commodities, and nobody knows how to properly feed them. They end up with metabolic bone disease. They end up with crippling and debilitating and very, they suffer in the process. And that, for me is frustrating, because it's really just a simple point of educating yourself prior to deciding to take on the responsibility of maintaining one of these pets.
But you're in a relatively poor state, and you're talking about medicines and preventions that require a lot of money. So, how many of those? What percentage of those animals are in poor health due to the fact that they can't? That people just don't have the means to take care of them.
So Arkansas is rural, and we are, but we're not that poor. We actually have a pretty strong economy, particularly because we house a lot of corporate and headquarters. Walmart's here, Tyson's here. There's several big trucking industries here. U.S. Steel is here. We're the largest producer of armory for the entire military, for the entire nation. We've got oil in South Arkansas. So we've got plenty of money and resources. And this isn't unique to Arkansas. I experienced this in New York. I experienced this in Maine. I don't think it's an economic issue. I think it's an education and an ignorance issue and a lack of assuming proper responsibility. And just honestly, a simple Google search to understand what the responsibilities are for husbandry and housing. And we're talking about simple things like understanding that. I mean, I just went and got my daughter fish for Christmas, and we did our research and realized, okay, these are tropical fish. We need a heating unit in the aquarium. Originally bought this cute little mermaid 5-gallon tank and quickly upgraded to a 20-gallon tank because the little neon fish she wanted were not gonna do well in that environment, and it wasn't big enough to put the heating thing in there and the filter they needed. And once you realize everything that goes into making sure these animals are properly cared for, a lot of people just don't bother to take that step. And I kind of get frustrated because these are, people will Google basketball stats. Like, how many people do you walk down the street that can rattle off Kobe Bryant stats? But yet they can't take the time to Google proper husbandry of animals that they are responsible for their lives and their welfare. And, I just, that's kind of where I get frustrated as a veterinarian. I think it's a simple fix, and it's not always economic. I mean, the adjustments we had to make for the fish maybe cost me $25. We're not talking about $250 or even $2,000. But then there's that also as well is, I have a giant breed dog. I have a 200-pound dog. And with that comes a financial responsibility that, thank God or whoever, I have the resources to take on. But it's also something, I got my first giant breed dog at 47 years old because that was the first time in my life I could handle the financial responsibility of feeding a dog 6 cups of, quality food a day and having to deal with, oh, he may bloat, and oh, he may have knee surgery, and oh, he may need physical therapy because he is a giant breed dog. Or just the fact that if he needs anything, he needs 3 times what the average size pet needs. So my expenses are 3 times the average size pet. And I think that's a responsibility that people need to stop and recognize. Even picking your breed. I mean, how many people pick a golden retriever because it's pretty and don't think about how much energy a golden retriever takes? I think golden retrievers are amazing. I will never have one. That is not my lifestyle. I have mastiffs because they're blobs that lay near my TV and all they want to do is snuggle and sleep because that's my lifestyle. I am not going running, jogging. I'm not playing fetch for 2.5 hours. And I can appreciate a golden retriever from afar, but there's no way I'm going to make a golden retriever suffer in my lifestyle because they're not compatible. And I think that's a responsibility as pet owners that we need to take.
And the thing also is when people come out and they say, if you feel lazy or whatever, get yourself a goldfish. I mean, goldfish. You probably need a 300-gallon tank for a goldfish because they are huge. They're monsters. You know what I mean? They don't stay in a little pot prize and put it in. And they don't need temperature. Well, probably they do because if it's too cold, they hibernate. Like you said, people, I mean, back in the days, you had to buy a book. Now it's Google. You don't have to go nowhere, you know.
And to that point, there's no excuse in my mind, and I struggle with that a lot as a veterinarian when I get animals that come in at 2:00 in the night, and this animal's been suffering for a week, and they've just now decided it's an emergency at 2:00 at night, and then they're mad because it's going to cost more money. Well, had you recognized, which you did, because you told me the first time you saw a sign was 2 weeks ago, you had called your regular vet or even come into the emergency center then, we probably would have had something we could have treated. Your animal would have suffered less, and you would have saved yourself finances. But it's a very frustrating part of my life, is recognizing how much animals suffer because of our, what I consider somewhat irresponsible ignorance, because there's information out there, it's available, and the average person knows how to get it, because these are the same people I can ask them any basketball, football, baseball stats, and they can rattle them off. So they know how to use Google. So I get a little frustrated with that, because it does directly impact animals.
Let me ask you one thing. I had a case years ago, and I was upset. And what happened is she had, I think it was like a shepherd or a husky, and she doesn't believe in vaccinating the dog at all. And what happened was, she said, if the dog is always inside, I don't have to vaccinate him for rabies or anything. That's okay. But now you call me because your dog ran off. Now you got a lost dog. The dog will get any kind of disease or give a disease to another dog. He'll get bitten by a bat, raccoon gets rabies. What are you going to do? Because you have to take it down.
Well, and I throw this at my clients often. You know, it's one thing to have an opinion about vaccines. It's another thing to follow public health policy. We are in a position where we get bit. If an unvaccinated animal in the state of New York, in the state of New Jersey, and 48 out of the 50 states, if you get bit, that animal typically has to be, if it has no vaccine history, has to be euthanized. The head has to be cut off, and it has to be tested for rabies. So I get owners that come in, and the first question I ask is he vaccinated for rabies, especially at fractious cats that are sick. Animals don't always bite to be malicious, and I'm not accusing, you know, sometimes owners feel like I'm accusing their animals of being malicious, but your animal's sick. He doesn't feel good. He doesn't know me. You have taken him out of his safety zone when he's at his most vulnerable, and we're manhandling him, right? We're sticking things up his butt. We are probing him. We are stabbing him with needles, all the things necessary to make sure he's in health. But you can't fault the animal for reacting like an animal. But the problem is once he bites one of my employees, which happened last weekend in South Brooklyn, I have to send my employee to the ER. They have to get shots. Luckily, this dog had a vaccine history, so it didn't have to be euthanized. But it was out of date, so I still had to quarantine the dog. But, you know, these cats, especially people that love to get cats and never vaccinate them, you know, the first thing when they show up at the ER, if your pet bites me, which is very likely, you know, we do all we can to avoid getting bit. I don't like getting bit. He has to be euthanized, and I have to cut his head off. It is traumatic for everybody involved, and I don't like doing it, but it is state and federal law. And that's the other thing, is it doesn't matter what state you live in, these regulations is federal. So people need to, at minimum, vaccinate for rabies. And I had a dog come in the other day, and this was a super sad story. 8-year-old dog, loved by his family. They decided, I don't know for what reason, to stop giving it heartworm medication. It's now in what we call Covell syndrome, which is end-stage heartworm disease. So, you know, the things we say behind the scenes is, why was that choice made? Were they just deciding to kill their dog? You're talking about $10 a month in heartworm medication could have saved your dog's life, versus $3,000 to attempt to stabilize a dog that's in end-stage heartworm disease. It's probably not going to make it. That's suffering from heartworm disease, from pulmonary hypertension. It can't breathe. His heart's not pumping properly. His belly's filling up with fluid. His liver's congested. He's vomiting. Like, why? Like, I don't even understand it, because you don't believe it. Like, what's not to believe? I mean, we have years and years of research that these are real diseases. And with a lot of the southern animals being adopted up north, you no longer have the luxury in New England to choose to not give heartworm medication year round. I can't tell you how many heartworm positive dogs I saw in Portland, Maine, because they were adopting dogs from the south, and the prevalence of heartworms came with all those adoptions. So
I'd like to, you mentioned cats in the conversation, and cats having rabies. I don't know if you read about it in the papers, but there were 2 instances last week in Westchester County of cat hoarding. There were 150 cats removed from a house in Yorktown. Unfortunately, the cat owners had passed away, a couple, and the cats were just left there in the house in deplorable condition. The cats have been left on their own for, I think, 3 or 4 days. But then a similar instance happened in Yonkers. And I believe in Yonkers, there were 200 cats that were left, that were in a hoarding situation. And now you have a total abandoned cat population of roughly between 300 and 400 cats, most of which have not been vaccinated. And Yorktown and Yonkers are scrambling to find places for these cats. That are being farmed out to rescue groups all over Westchester County and probably outside of the state. But I would say that a lot of these cats haven't been vaccinated, and that means that a lot of those cats, if they bite one of the workers, will have to be euthanized.
Well, and not to mention, when you get that many cats that haven't been vaccinated, the prevalence of feline leukemia, FIP, feline AIDS is probably rampant. And then that one kind of complicates the adoption process, because you're adopting out an animal that is eventually going to be terminal. And 2, you have to find adoption situations where they have no other cats and plan to get no other cats. And, those are big extreme stories, but I see people come into my clinic weekly where you can smell, and then they tell you they have 19 cats. They don't have the money to take care of the one they brought in. The one they brought in is holding on to life barely. They're hoarding. And I think the worst part of the hoarding situations is it's usually mental health issues. They have all the good intentions. They love their animals. They don't have the resources, but they also have a mental disease that does not allow them to recognize, I'm not the best home for this dog or this cat or these animals. Even as a veterinarian, I know my limits. 2 cats and a dog with my horse, financially, from a day-to-day operational perspective, that's all I can handle. And I'm not going to take on more than that. And it doesn't make me a bad human. It doesn't make me non-empathetic. It's actually the opposite, because I know my limitations. If I took on more than that, then an animal's going to suffer, or my household's going to suffer. So that's a mental health issue where they're not recognizing their own limitations. And they're putting, unfortunately, the animals at risk. But it's much more prevalent than you think. You only hear about the really extreme cases. But, I can smell a hoarder a mile away.
And you're in a rural area. So how would you compare the level of hoarding in a rural in the area where you are as opposed to Brooklyn?
Oh, it's definitely higher in the city. I think there's more anxiety, there's more stress, there's more drivers for people to seek emotional, I don't know what to call it, but that emotional connection from animals. Here in the rural world, what I see more, and actually it's much less than it was, 20 years ago when I grew up here. Animals had a purpose and were more of a need or a commodity. And once their usage was expired or no longer available, they were considered disposable. That's a lot less here. Right. because we are a rural community, I think people have bigger, like I have a fairly average size house for this area, but I also have a ½ acre of land. And I think that's pretty standard for moderate income. So people can also handle a little more when it comes to animals. And then our culture, we're a little more interconnected with animals. Most people have chickens and eat fresh eggs, for example, even in the city. Most people have goats. Most people have horses. And then, dogs and cats. I think the biggest issue we have here is we still have that kind of barn cat mentality and that outside dog mentality. And people go get Pomeranians and then chain them up to those lines. And I'm like, you did not, especially for 100-degree Arkansas weather, you did not buy an outside dog. Like a Pomeranian or a Chihuahua or a pug would never be an outside dog. So that's what I run into here more. Yeah, exactly. Inappropriate expectations of these specialty breeds. Again, that people can breed for the wrong reason. If you want an outside dog, get loud. Is
Hello?
accommodating. Did you lose me?
Yeah, but you're like breaking up somehow.
I think Angel, did you want to jump in there?
Well, I mean, in the Bronx, it's the same way. Actually, when I joined the force in 1986, they had wolf packs, and they would stay in abandoned buildings. When you go in the abandoned building to check it out, you see eyes, like in the movies. You see a whole bunch of eyes. It's scary, and at nighttime, the midnights, and then what the HPCA did was somehow eliminated them because it was so much. The same way they do with the cats. I mean, with the cats, people are saying, well, we have spay and neuter and we do the thing with the cats for the alley cats and all that. I says, good. But what is the reason for that? The reason is the spay and neuter, that cat dies and the other cat dies and the other cat dies of old age and there's no more cats. That's the reason that program came out. It's not for you could dump the cat in there and put more cats in there. It doesn't make sense. It's to eliminate stray cats and have them a good life, the ones who are living.
But you know something? A lot of people, what do I know? But it seems that some people prefer, particularly in urban areas, not to spay and neuter female cats because they can breed them and then they sell them. You see them on Craigslist all the time. And you scratch your head and you think, okay, so there's somebody trying to sell a cat and the cat hasn't been spayed. And you think to yourself, well, why is that? I mean, there are all sorts of programs. And then that cat was used to breed. So that cat basically was a moneymaker.
Well, and they're not really money makers. And that's where a lot of people get confused. They're like, oh, I have a litter of 5 kittens or 5 whatever breed dogs. I can get $2,000 a pet. If you actually properly care for the mother, properly care for the kittens, keep them, or puppies, keep them as long as they're supposed to be. Because I would get 4-week-old kittens that have been taken away from their mother, or 4-week-old puppies. That's way too early. And they're not supposed to be weaned until they're 8 weeks old. No vaccines, coming in at 6 weeks old with parvo. I mean, it is impossible to treat neonates that are that young for such a severe disease. All of this could be prevented with proper care of the mother, and then the maternal antibodies they get from the milk protect them, which is why you're not supposed to wean until they're 8 weeks old. And if you do it right, it is not as profitable as people think. The people that make money off of it are not doing it right, and they're rolling the dice and using these animals to be expendable and called puppy mills. We just have a bunch of micro puppy mills called backyard breeding. And in my opinion, it's animal cruelty. I just don't. There's a county in California that requires a $32,000 a year breeder's license to even be eligible to legally own an unspayed and unneutered animal. From a welfare perspective, to save our pet populations, because everybody wants to rescue all these animals that are in kill shelters. They should have been rescued before they were even born, right? They should have never had to suffer that plight at all, because their parents should have been spayed and neutered. Because 90% of my clients come in pyometra, 2 years old, pyometra, 4 years old, pyometra, 7 years old. Oh, save the uterus, I want to breed it. You don't even know what pyometra is. If you don't know how to do a Punnett square, you shouldn't be breeding. That's my philosophy. If I show you a Punnett square and you don't know what I'm talking about, don't breed a dog, because you haven't educated yourself and you don't have the responsibility. You haven't taken on the responsibility to appropriately breed an animal. And most of them don't have the finances to properly breed animals and take care of the litter and the puppies. I'm sorry, the parents or the mother. And there's tons of issues behind all of this. I think it's borderline. I think backyard breeding is unfortunately, animals are considered property, so there's a limitation legally to what we can enforce. But in my opinion, I think it's an animal welfare issue.
There's one thing I want to say before we continue. You're not only a vet, because your heart is out there. Yep. You rescue animals. Okay?
So I rescued my Mastiff. He's got bilateral hip dysplasia and bilateral cruciate ligament ruptures. He's got 4 surgeries in his future. But I adopted him knowing that. So
what I want to talk about is the job and dedication you did to help someone out with multi-pets in Queens.
Oh, yes.
I don't want to mention names, but she's a beautiful person. But we're talking about almost altogether total 30 pets.
30 pets. Wait.
And not only we went over there, and it wasn't an easy place to be. Thank you. It was me and Smith and Weston, and you were there. And we got all the dogs that threw in my car
with bolt cutters to cut them out of there.
30, so I was like, let me comprehend this. 30 pit bulls. You rescued.
30 pits.
Yeah, it was multiple rescues, but the most dangerous one was getting one of the dogs away from a drug dealer, and he had huge chains. He was like bolted, and we had to get bolt cutters, and we had the police, and we had Angel, who was armed, and I literally just ran in the backyard, had no idea if this dog was going to bite me or not. We had no idea how human aggressive these animals were, but I just cut the bolts, took the dog, and ran, because it was either that, the dog die, or I get shot. Those were my options. So I took the bolt cutters, we cut them out, and threw the dog in the back of Angel's truck and drove off and hope nobody followed us.
Yeah. And then we took those dogs, and I actually called responsible people, rescuers. I called cops. I mean, they all came, and out of my van, right it was in Queens, in a restaurant, in the back in a parking lot, and she was giving the shots and everything, what the dogs need. People had to give money for the shots because it was too many dogs, and we rehomed all these dogs.
Wow.
Then I took some dogs. I had to go to Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Jersey, because my cousin still got the dog. The big humongous dog. She still has him. She took him to Petco. He has his diploma and everything. He's smarter than the family. But all this is because of you. That's what I'm saying. She does more than just go out there and do her work. She does more than above. She does rescues, and she's
and I would say, because one thing I get a lot from a day-to-day basis is all you care about is the money. I get paid the same whether an owner accepts the medical plan or not. Like, I don't control the pricing, and we do. Luckily, thank God, I work for a company who was actually started by my mentor, and I have the utmost respect for this man. We have the luxury to discount so much to get people that have less than ideal financial circumstances, but are in animal emergencies. But still, the bottom line is it costs money. But my company that I work for and myself, it's not about the money in the sense that that's all we care about, but we got to keep the lights on. We got to get the employees paid. We have to be able to be open, to be there to serve all the animals. So yeah, it's not free. We do have veg cares. We do have options that we try to work out. We'll do GoFundMe's, whatever, to help people that really need those services. But it's really the ASPCA and the North Shore Animal League that are grant programs and federally funded programs that are able to give low cost options. But on an emergency basis, my last thought process is money. Like, it does not affect my earning potential, my salary whatsoever, whether somebody accepts a bill or not. My number one goal is making a comprehensive medical plan that puts that pet's welfare at number one. So I'm always the gold standard first. If finances prevent that, we can kind of try to balance out, okay, what can I give you for free? What can your finances cover? And how can we get as close to that gold standard plan as possible? But one reason I have hesitated to ever open a clinic is I never wanted it to be about money. I wanted it to be about the medicine. I wanted it to be about my clients. I wanted it to be about the animals. I work emergency medicine, and unfortunately, not all of our outcomes are positive. Right. One thing I try to always represent is that I'm there for the clients too, and their worst times, right? I may not be able to save your animal. I'm not God, right? Medicine is limited. But at least I can make that the most pleasant experience for you and your animal as possible. And that ultimately is my goal, is not just to be there for the animal, but also to be there for the owner.
I think it's important for people to be aware that, vets aren't exactly part of the money class. They're not heart surgeons. Veterinary school is extremely expensive. Yes. It's probably equivalent to, or even more than somebody getting an MD degree. It's very, very pricey. And it takes years and years of study. So your earning potential doesn't really begin until you're probably in your past your late 30s, because there are loans and there are apprenticeships, not apprenticeships, but residencies. And it's not the lucrative profession that people think that it is. And the majority of vets go into that profession because, as Catherine says, it's not because they want to make big bucks, but it's their love and their dedication and their passion for animals and the animals' owners. But somebody has to assume the guardianship of these animals, as well as healing them, making them well. And it just takes a huge amount of dedication.
Let me ask you something. You were talking about exotic animals and the mentality of the people who has the animals. There was 3 incidents. One of them, I was actually in the morning rush, the zoo in Dallas. I told them that I actually believed there was a person by himself, and possibly the person wants the animal for themselves. And that's exactly what happened. He actually was trying to keep a leopard, because that wasn't going to come out well. And then he attacked by a vulture, so he ended up killing it. And then he ended up stealing the 2 monkeys and putting in an abandoned building, tropical monkeys, the emperors, and it was cold, so they could have died in the abandoned building. The guy did get arrested. The mentality he has. And then another place, which was in Louisiana, that one is more sound like the black market. They stole 12 squirrel monkeys that were just breeding. So those are gone. So that's the black market for me. But what we got here is somebody did you ever saw the movie Born Free? They took the lions out and let them go free. Well, that's what they did in the Central Park Zoo. They let go an eagle owl. This guy is huge. And there's an update.
North America.
But there's an update, though, because they were trying to catch it yesterday around 8:30 at night, and he broke off of the net and flew away. That's how strong and powerful these birds are. What do you think of the mentality? I mean, people. You said the mentality of the people. Have anybody tried to bring us some type of real exotic animals that they actually cannot have?
Yes. But I will kind of. There's a difference between animal welfare and animal activism. I find animal activism quite dangerous. For exactly what we're seeing at the Bronx Zoo. Letting go an animal who is not native to this country. He's not only been raised in captivity, he does not have the learned skill set to survive. He may get lucky, right? It's
an instinct,
right? But he's not equipped for North America. We also have to consider what is the impact on our native species, right? These people take on platforms that are not beneficial to the animals. I've been egged by PETA because I did rhino reproduction. You know, and yes, I got semen from all the rhinos. We were able to make rhino babies after rhinos had died. We're trying to preserve a species that only has 32 living animals left. And that was 20 years ago when I was doing my PhD. At this point, there's none left. We were trying to preserve that species. In my opinion, I mean, let's talk about real places they could have a real impact on animal welfare. The fact that we're one of the only first world countries that still allow toxic rodenticides.
Yes.
Who do you think toxic rodenticides impact? You kill your rodents. For one, you have a rodent problem because you have cleanliness problem. You either have food that is too available, or you have warmth, shelter, and water that is too available. You eliminate those things, you eliminate your rodents, number one. Number two, you're debilitating first, because they don't die right away. Rats are smart, right? That's why you have long-acting rodenticides. So you're giving these animals something that will debilitate them to the point that they're easy prey. Who are they prey to? Your pet dog, the coyote, and the birds of prey.
Yeah.
We rescued an eagle. It took us 3 days. I was sitting in my office at LaGuardia when I was director of the vet tech program, and I had an eagle, or an owl. Sorry, it was a hawk. I can't remember what kind of hawk it was right now. But anyway, he came and sat on my perch on my window and just sat there. And it was so abnormal behavior because I'm moving around my office. I'm doing advisory meetings. There is no reason why this bird should feel comfortable sitting there. And then several of my colleagues had mentioned he had come to their window. So I called ACC, we called ASPCA, we did everything we had to do. We caught this eagle, and he ended up dying from rodenticide toxicity. But he had babies, so we had to go get his nest. I'm sorry, she had babies, so we had to go get her nest. But this is the number one killer of our birds of prey. That should be a platform for PETA, right? Instead of cutting out an animal that is not equipped to survive in our area, you can argue the value of zoos all day long. But I think a zoo like the Bronx Zoo, the Central Park Zoo, these guys operate, they are also dumping tons of money. Wildlife Conservation Society operates out of the Bronx Zoo. They dump tons of money into in situ research programs to preserve species in their natural habitats. They are preserving natural habitats. They are educating locals in those habitats or those areas. They are saving those animals. And yes, they have a few ambassador animals in quote unquote captivity. A lot of these animals would otherwise be dead, right? They would either have been culled because they're in populations that are encroached on by humans and have been decimated and decreased to the point that they can't survive in their natural numbers, or they would have they would have died because they were hurt or injured or have some kind of no longer feasible injury for wildlife, for survival in the wild. So and a lot of these animals have then been bred in captivity, and you can argue both sides of that coin, but I think the good outweighs the bad, in my opinion. But releasing these animals when you know they are not equipped to survive I think is just absolutely irresponsible. It totally undermines what I think PETA originally stood for. And I don't discount the power of PETA. I remember when PETA did only animals should wear fur. And recently you get on the subway and everybody has a damn fur coat on. And I just wish those PETA commercials would come back, because that's one thing that makes me cringe. But I think they need to refocus into where they can actually have an impact that is real and impactful, instead of releasing this single animal. And I think there's one other animal they released, if I remember correctly. They're not doing any justice to that animal. He's eventually going to get caught, I hope, or going to die because he's not meant to survive.
But
or he could impact our native species. Think about rabbits in New Zealand. That's an introduced species. They're now a pest species.
Yeah, but like for example, if can this owl, like for example, the polar bear and the grizzly bear, or the dog and the coyote, they call it koi, can this owl breed with another owl native to North America, like the the great owl, the great owl, which is also
great owl. I mean, they're both owl species. They should be able to breed.
It could happen. Now, if it happens, now we have a different kind of species or whatever. I mean, the dog world, they call them mutts, and then from there they could become invasive. Then
they could become invasive. It could be detrimental to our native species. Think about starlings. They were introduced from Europe. They actually disrupt the nest of our native songbirds. And I mean, there's a whole coalition to get rid of starlings. I'm not that extreme, but introduced species are destructive. I mean, even get the cuts down south. Yeah.
Huh? Well, like in Florida with the lizards and the boas and a whole bunch of other animals running around like a jungle. I mean, they're destroying the land and everything else. But I also
that's also a misnomer. Is people think, oh, I bought this wild animal at a pet store. I don't want it anymore. I can just release it in the wild. Most of those animals are dead within a week.
What they do with the fishes also, when they throw them in the water, back in the water again, they become invasive. They take the food away from the ones who are native. But in Florida, all these snakes and iguanas, they're by the buildings. People are actually eating them. That's how much they have over there. But I also was told that, which I agree in a way, that cats themselves are invasive. They actually claim they're invasive, the number one invasive, when they leave them out there, but they kill all the birds.
Yeah, they are the number one killer of songbirds. And that is my biggest argument for having cats as house pets. Like this whole idea that cats should be indoor, outdoor. I mean, I'm not a proponent of that. They are the number one killer of songbirds.
I'd like to go back to something that Angel briefly and you also, Catherine, touched on a couple of sentences ago. There seems to be the frightening prospect of new species, crossbred species of animals, due to the fact that people are abandoning their animals, letting them go to parts unknown and breeding with native species. Angel brought up not a future scenario, but a present scenario where you now have coyotes breeding with regular American dogs. So now they're producing some super breed of dogs, which is something that we could see in all different populations of birds and cats. But what's particularly frightening is that you get a coyote that could possibly breed with a pit bull. Then what kind of animal has been created?
Well, you start domesticating them, right? So animals are domesticated because we have bred them. They're, we're in like F40,000 or 400,000. We're so far away from that F1 generation that they no longer have a lot of their wild tendencies. You start breeding them back to their wild counterparts, and all canids technically should be able to breed. So whether it's a coyote, a pit bull, or a chihuahua or whatever, technically they should be reproductively sound to couple. There's other evolutionary reasons why animals are segregated from a geographical perspective, and how they cohabitate and what their social arrangements are that prevent them from breeding. But from just a physiologic perspective, you take the sperm and the egg and put them together, they should fertilize. But when you start going backwards, you're undoing the domestication, and then it becomes a public health issue. Then it becomes, how aggressive is that animal going to be? And you see that with these cats, these savanna cats, these
Yes.
cervid cats. They come in the clinic. I mean, and it's really sad. I mean, I've had several of them. They're so aggressive, you can't get them out of the kennel. They are lunging through the kennel and moving the kennel across the floor. My only option is to sedate them, and we're gassing them down, which is the most dangerous way to sedate an animal. I've done no blood work. I've done no cardiology evaluation, and I'm giving this animal the least controllable form of anesthetic agent, which is gas. And then once they're down, sometimes they crash. And I had two particular cats that I remember that I was traumatized from. I won't mention names. They had really cute names though. But both of them died under separate circumstances in separate clinics, but it was all anesthetic related. So we're just putting these animals at so much risk when they can't be handled, or when they're, and I don't do aggressive animals. If I have an animal in my house and it's biting me, there's a breakdown. Either I'm the wrong house for that animal, or there's a personality mismatch. Something's going on. He's not staying in my house. I don't feed anything.
It's out of their control. They don't know, like you said before. They didn't do the stonework. They didn't do the study. They did the ego. Yeah. My ego is, I want a lion.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that is all that is. That is self-centered, narcissistic, egoistic behavior.
Like yours, Ardina, with the story that you guys talked about last week about the tiger.
Yeah.
The tiger in Harlem. I mean,
Sure, that was all. I mean, how you gotta, even though you have to give the guy credit, Antoine Yates, you have to give him some credit for his affection and his compassion for animals. But at the same time, picture a Bengal tiger inside a 3-bedroom apartment in a housing project in Harlem. How does that work? I mean, a tiger that size takes up the majority of your living room. What do you do when you go to the refrigerator? You have to step over the tiger so you can go and get a glass of milk?
Well, if you run away from the tiger, you run to the bathroom. He had an alligator in the tub.
So. Yeah, I mean, what's even more disturbing is that this went on for years. Don't forget that he got that tiger as a cub, as a baby. So there was ample time for that tiger to go from being a small cub to a full-grown tiger. So people heard that tiger making noise. People smelled the urine from the apartment, but everybody just gave it a pass and said, well, it's there. So what?
Well, and I think we also have to recognize this is a tiger that's in the projects. So this is a man who needs enough financial support that he's living in the projects. And yet he's taking on a Bengal tiger. Do you know what the Bengal tiger budget of the Bronx Zoo is? It's probably more than the average American's annual salary. So to me, that's a mismatch right there. There's a financial obligation that goes into taking care of an animal like that. And I'm not opposed, actually, to private exotic animal ownership if it's for the right reasons. I have several friends who own elephants, but they also, one, are financially able to take care of these elephants. Second, these elephants also serve as ambassadors, and they all contribute to the wild population support and management. So they almost function as AZA accredited zoo, even though they're not. They're still taking on that same role and responsibility. But you have a man who's in the projects. By definition, he doesn't have the resources to take care of a Bengal tiger.
Right.
It was insanity. You know, there was a big rescue, and if anybody's interested in it, you can see the video, which still stands on YouTube. And every time I watch it, it's still fascinating. There were tons of cops there to get this tiger out. The tiger lunged at the cop through the window. I mean, it was very, very dramatic. And there was a documentary film made about the owner and the tiger and the aftermath and the incident. But you have to believe that this is not, it's not a one-on. That if you look across the United States, somewhere in somebody's apartment building right now as we speak, they have a tiger in there. They have a tiger, or they have, two boa constrictors, or they have pets that really should not be in that apartment. So it's kind of imperative for people to call the authorities, that if they even have a hint that those exotic animals or an exotic animal is in somebody's apartment, then folks, you got to pick up the phone. You have to pick up the phone, notify the authorities that that animal is there, not only to protect the public but also to protect the animal. I mean, the animal needs to be removed and put into a proper environment where it can thrive and be taken care of according to that animal's needs. It's not cute. It's not engaging to have an animal that doesn't belong in an apartment, or in your house for that matter.
It's also not a God-given right that you get to own any living being you feel the connection to. I love rhinos. I love elephants. I'm not going to go buy one. In fact, I love sloths. There's one on the black market right now in Florida. If you Google it, you can buy a sloth from Florida for $8,000. It's something I would never do. It's not, and to me, it's not our God-given right to just go out and get any animal we want or we love and then shove it in our house. Because the other thing that happens, even with ferrets in New York, ferrets are illegal in New York. How many people have ferrets and don't take them to the vet because they're scared they're going to get confiscated? How many people have Bengal tigers that don't take them to the vet because they're scared they're going to get confiscated? How many people have monkeys illegally and don't take them to the vet because they're scared they're going to get confiscated? So there's that piece too, is owning illegal exotic animals comes with the understanding that they are not getting the care that they need. It's a welfare issue immediately because none of these people are going to vets because they're scared they're going to get reported and confiscated.
Confiscated and a big summons, a big fine.
Yes.
Or probably even jail time.
Well, you know what? It's ego. It's more, when you think about it, it's more about the owner than it is about the animal itself. That people have these things, like they go out and they buy Lamborghinis. It's just not only impractical in an urban environment, but it requires a lot of maintenance and a lot of care. It comes with an owner's manual that has a lot of paragraphs. So that's important. And what isn't important, but what is important when it comes to YouTube time and broadcast time, is that we are, unfortunately, Catherine, merging towards the end of our show. And as always, you are a fascinating guest, and we really, really want to have you back on, because you are not only just a shining example of how people should have the compassion, or a fraction of the compassion that you have for animals, but you're also a wealth of knowledge. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show again.
Well, it's a pleasure. I love the work that you guys do too. I mean, I've known Angel for a long time, and we've stayed friends because we both have a aligned moral and ethical code to protect animals no matter what.
Right.
And with that, I'm going to let that guy over there.
You're pointing right. Yeah. You got me. We're looking for the water now.
Our screen is different. If I point this way, it's incorrect screen. It's an incorrect screen area. And if I point that way, he's seeing it differently. So I'm going to point this way because I want to say, I'm going to give Angel Nieves the last word.
Yes. Thank you for coming. I want everybody to spay and neuter the pets. and it's 10 p.m., do you know where your pets are?
Mine has to
roll that videotape. And that's it, folks.
Goodbye.
Good night, good morning to wherever you are in the world. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday.